The doctor's hands were shaking when she pulled up my results on the screen. Not a little. Full on trembling, like she was trying to hold something back. Some reaction she hadn't yet decided whether to let out. I remember thinking, it's cancer. That's the only thing that makes a doctor's hands shake. It wasn't cancer. What she told me next changed everything I thought I knew about my own life, my own home, and the man I had spent 7 years sleeping next to. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start where it actually started, not in that sterile little office with the buzzing fluorescent light and the paper covered exam table. It started about 8 months before that, when I noticed something was wrong with me but couldn't figure out what. My name is Leah. I'm 31 years old. I work as a graphic designer for a small marketing agency in Charlotte, North Carolina. I have a rescue dog named Pepper, a standing order at my favorite coffee shop 2 blocks from the office, and until about a year ago, I thought I had a pretty decent life. I met my husband, Connor, at a mutual friend's birthday party when I was 23. He was charming in a quiet way, not loud about it, not performative. He remembered the names of my coworkers after I mentioned them once. He called when he said he would. After years of dating men who treated basic decency like an upgrade package, I thought I had finally found someone solid. We got married when I was 26, bought a house in a suburb outside Charlotte the following year. Nothing flashy, 3 bedrooms, a backyard, a neighborhood where people still waved at each other. For a while it was good, or I thought it was. Looking back now, I'm not sure how much of it was real and how much was just me wanting it to be. The first thing I noticed was the headaches. I've had tension headaches my whole life, nothing unusual there. But these were different, heavier. These sat right behind my eyes and didn't move for days at a time. I started keeping ibuprofen in my desk, my purse, my car. I went through a bottle every 2 weeks. Then the fatigue hit. Not normal tired, the kind of tired where you sleep 9 hours and wake up feeling like you haven't slept at all. I started falling asleep on the couch before 9 o'clock. Connor would wake me up, guide me to bed, and in the morning he'd tell me how worried he was. You've been running yourself into the ground, he'd say. You need to slow down. I believed him. I asked my manager for a reduced workload. I cancelled plans with friends. I stopped going to the gym. Stopped going to the elaborate weekend meals I used to love. I simplified everything. And still the fatigue didn't lift. I went to my primary care doctor. She ran a standard panel. Thyroid, CBC, iron levels. Everything came back normal. She suggested I might be depressed, referred me to a therapist. I went. It wasn't depression, or at least not the kind that explained the physical symptoms. The brain fog started around month 4. I would be mid sentence at work and lose the word I was reaching for. Simple words. Words I had used 1,000 times. My co worker, Amanda, started finishing my sentences for me. Not to be rude, she was genuinely trying to help, but I could see the look on her face. The slight pause before she did it. The careful way she watched me afterward. I drove past my own exit on the highway twice in 1 week. The second time, I sat in the Walgreens parking lot for 10 minutes trying to remember where I had been going. Connor was sympathetic. Almost too sympathetic, I would later think. Every time I described a new symptom, he would nod slowly, his face arranged in a perfect expression of concern. He'd read things online. He'd come home with supplements, magnesium, B12, adaptogen blends in brown glass bottles. He made me smoothies in the mornings before work. Green ones, full of spinach and protein powder and whatever else he'd decided was good for me that week. He was so attentive, so caring. I felt guilty sometimes for being sick, for being a burden, for not being able to just get better. I didn't realize he was the reason I wasn't getting better. Month 6, my hair started falling out. Not in patches, just more than it should. I'd run my fingers through it in the shower and come away with a handful. My ponytails got thinner. I started parting my hair differently to cover it. I bought thickening shampoo and scalp serums and told myself it was stress. My doctor referred me to a neurologist after I failed a simple coordination test in her office, touching finger to nose, heel to shin. Nothing dramatic, just slightly off. She said she wanted to rule things out. The word rule out in medicine, I've learned, means I have a suspicion I'm not ready to say out loud. The neurologist's name was Dr. Whitmore. She had short grey hair and reading glasses she kept pushing up her nose, and an office that smelled like old textbooks. She was thorough in a way that felt almost aggressive. She asked about my diet, my sleep, my stress levels, my home environment. She asked whether anyone in my household had access to the things I ate and drank regularly. I thought it was an odd question. I answered yes, of course. My husband and I shared a kitchen. She wrote something down and didn't explain why she'd asked. She ordered a heavy metals panel. I didn't know what that was. She explained it briefly, a blood test that measures levels of certain metals in the bloodstream: lead, mercury, arsenic, cadmium, things that don't belong in the human body in significant quantities. I drove home and told Connor about the appointment. He asked what tests she was running. I told him about the heavy metals panel. His expression didn't change. That's the thing I keep coming back to. His expression did not change. He nodded, said that's probably just precautionary, and asked what I wanted for dinner. 2 weeks later, I went back to Dr. Whitmore's office alone. Connor had offered to come, but I told him I'd be fine. I don't know why I said that. Some instinct I hadn't yet named. She pulled up my results on the screen, and that's when her hands started shaking. She took off her reading glasses. She set them on the desk. She looked at me for a long moment before she spoke, and in that moment I felt the specific, unmistakable cold of someone who is about to tell you something that is going to split your life into a before and an after. Leah, she said, your levels of thallium are significantly elevated. I didn't know what thallium was. I told her that. She explained it carefully. Thallium is a heavy metal. It has no safe level of exposure in humans. It was historically used in rat poison before it was banned in the US in 1975. It's odorless, tasteless. It accumulates in the body over time, disrupting the nervous system, attacking the hair follicles, crossing the blood-brain barrier. The symptoms of chronic low-dose thallium poisoning look almost exactly like burnout, like depression, like stress. How would someone be exposed to this? I asked. My voice was very steady. I was proud of that later. She said that accidental environmental exposure was possible, but rare. Occupational exposure, mining, electronics manufacturing, was more common. She looked at me steadily. But your level suggests sustained, repeated exposure over months. Not a single incident. Not an environmental source. The room was very quiet. Someone has been putting this in something you consume regularly, she said. I can't tell you who, but I can tell you this did not happen by accident. I think I nodded. I think I said thank you. I remember walking to my car and sitting in it for a long time. The engine wasn't running. I wasn't crying. I was just sitting there, trying to locate myself in a world that had just rearranged itself without asking my permission. My husband had been poisoning me. I didn't say it out loud. Not yet, but I knew. The way you sometimes know things before you've let yourself fully think them, the knowledge just settles into you like something that was always true and you were simply the last to find out. Dr. Whitmore had told me she was required to report this to authorities. She'd said it gently but clearly. She'd also said, and this part mattered, that she had not yet made that call. She wanted to give me 24 hours. She wanted to make sure I had a plan, that I wasn't going to go home and confront a man who had already demonstrated he was capable of hurting me. She told me not to drink or eat anything he prepared for me until I had figured out what I was going to do. I drove home. Connor was in the kitchen when I got there. He'd made pasta. He asked how the appointment went. She said the levels were a little off, but nothing to worry about. I said, probably just from old pipes in the house. He smiled. He handed me a glass of water. I took it, set it on the counter, and said I wasn't thirsty. That night, while he was watching TV, I sat in the bathroom with my phone and called my sister Brooke. She lives in Raleigh, about 2 hours away. I whispered the whole conversation. I told her everything. There was a long silence on her end, and then she said, "Get out of that house tonight." I told her I couldn't. Not yet. I needed to be smart. I needed proof. "You have proof," she said. "You have a blood test." "I need more," I said. "I need to understand how he's doing it." She argued with me. I understood why. But I had spent 6 months not understanding what was happening to my own body, and I was not going to rush the one moment where I finally had some power. I wanted to see it clearly before it was over. I started being very deliberate about what I ate and drank. Anything Connor didn't prepare, I consumed. Anything he did, I found ways to dispose of it without him noticing. The morning smoothies went down the sink while he was in the shower. The coffee he made me sat untouched until he left for work. I ate breakfast at the coffee shop near my office. I bought my own groceries and kept them in a separate bag in the back of my closet. Within 2 weeks, I noticed a difference. The fog was lifting, not all at once, not dramatically, but I was finishing my sentences again. I drove the right route home 3 days in a row. I also started paying closer attention to the smoothies. He made them every morning at exactly the same time, and he always sent me out of the kitchen first, always had some reason. "Go grab your bag. I'll bring this to you. Check if it's raining. I think I left a window open." I had thought he was being sweet. Now I watched from the hallway, through the gap in the door, and I saw him open the cabinet above the refrigerator, a cabinet I never used, never opened, and take out a small brown glass bottle. He added drops from it to my cup. Then he put it back, closed the cabinet, and called out that my smoothie was ready. I photographed the cabinet. I photographed the bottle from a distance as clearly as I could. I called a lawyer that afternoon from my car during lunch. Her name was Janet Walsh, and she had been recommended by Amanda's cousin, who had gone through a difficult divorce 2 years prior. I told her what was happening. She was quiet, and then she was very focused. She told me to stop touching anything in that cabinet, not to alert Connor in any way, and to call the detective she was going to refer me to. The detective came to my office 2 days later. He sat across from me at a small conference table with a legal pad and asked me to walk him through everything from the beginning. I had already written it all down: dates, symptoms, the appointment with Dr. Whitmore, what I had seen through the hallway gap. He took the photos I had taken. He told me what the next steps would look like. That evening, I came home and acted like nothing had changed. Connor had made chicken and rice. I said I wasn't feeling well and heated up some soup from a can I had bought myself. He watched me from the kitchen doorway. I told him I'd had a hard day and just wanted something simple. "You sure you don't what I made?" he said. "I'm sure," I said. "Thank you, though." I watched his face. Just for a second, just at the edges, something moved behind his eyes. Not concern. Something harder than concern. The detective and a second officer came to our house 3 mornings later when Connor was home. I had gone to Brooks the night before under the pretense of helping her with something. Janet had told me to be elsewhere when they arrived. They found the bottle in the cabinet above the refrigerator. The contents tested positive for thallium sulfate. They found a receipt on his phone for a chemical supply company in Ohio, purchased under a fake name he had created using an email address I had never seen. They found 6 months of search history, thallium symptoms, thallium detection time, thallium undetectable in standard blood work. He had done his research. He just hadn't counted on Dr. Whitmore running a heavy metals panel. Connor was arrested on a Tuesday. Brooke drove me to Janet's office and we sat in the parking lot for a while before I went inside. She kept asking if I was okay. I didn't know how to answer that. I wasn't not okay. I was something else, something that doesn't have a clean name, hollowed out but also more present in my own body than I had felt in months. During the investigation, more came out. Connor had a $400,000 life insurance policy on me that he had taken out 18 months earlier without my knowledge. He had refinanced our house quietly. I later discovered my signature on the paperwork, a signature I had no memory of giving, and had been funneling equity into an account I didn't know existed. His plan, as the prosecutor would later describe it in court, was to make it look like a prolonged illness, something gradual, something that would read on any standard medical chart as a body simply giving out. He had been careful. He had been patient. He had looked me in the face every single morning and handed me a drink that was slowly destroying my nervous system, and then held my hand while I apologized for being sick. I testified in December. I wore a blue blazer and I kept my hands flat on the table in front of me because I had learned, in the months since all of this began, that stillness helps me. The prosecutor walked me through everything. Connor's lawyer tried to suggest I had contaminated my own blood work, an argument so absurd it seemed to embarrass even the people in his corner. Dr. Whitmore testified after me. She was calm and precise and completely unmovable under cross examination. Connor was convicted on charges of attempted murder and aggravated assault. The judge sentenced him to 22 years, no possibility of parole for the first 15. There were people in that courtroom who had known us as a couple, neighbors, his co workers, one old friend from college who had been at our wedding. Some of them couldn't look at me. I understood. The version of our marriage they had believed in was gone, and grief about that was reasonable. But I had no room left to manage other people's grief. I had barely enough room for my own. The house sold in March. I took my half of the equity and moved to Asheville. I had always liked it there. The mountains, the small city pace, the way the air smells different in the mornings. I rented an apartment with big windows and hardwood floors and enough room for Pepper to have her own corner. I still see a neurologist every 3 months. The thallium levels have dropped significantly. My coordination is back to normal. The brain fog is mostly gone. Occasionally, it creeps back in when I'm run down. But my doctor says that may be something I manage for a few more years. The hair is growing back, slowly, but it is. I think about the things I explained away, the smoothies, the cabinet, the way he'd always find a reason to be the one handling my food and drinks, the attentiveness I had mistaken for love. I don't blame myself for not knowing. I blame myself sometimes for not listening when my body was screaming. But I'm trying to let that go too. Brooke visited last month. We sat on my balcony with takeout and watched the sun go behind the ridge, and she said, I keep thinking about how different things could have been if Dr. Whitmore hadn't run that test. I thought about that for a while. She almost didn't, I said. She told me later she almost just attributed it to MS. It was the hair loss that made her reconsider. My hair falling out in the shower every morning. The thing I had tried so hard to hide and minimize and cover up. It saved my life. I am rebuilding slowly. I work from home now, which I like. I joined a hiking group in Asheville, which I would not have predicted because I've never been particularly outdoorsy. But it turns out that moving your body through actual mountains does something for you that no supplement in a brown glass bottle ever could. I made a friend there, a woman named Cecile who knows my whole story and doesn't treat me like I'm fragile. That matters more than I expected it would. I don't know if I'll trust someone that way again. Not in the way I trusted Connor, that complete uncritical trust where you outsource your own safety to someone else because you believe they would never use it against you. I'm not sure that kind of trust is something I want anymore. I think what I want is something more clear eyed, something that keeps its own eyes open. What I know now, what I want you to hear if you're listening, is that your body is not lying to you. When something is wrong, it finds ways to say so, even when the words aren't there yet. I spent months apologizing for symptoms that were evidence. I called them weakness when they were, in fact, the one thing that ultimately told the truth. The doctor's hands were shaking because she already knew what she was about to tell me would change everything. She was right, it did. And I am still here. There's a moment I keep coming back to. Not the arrest, not the courtroom. It's the morning I stood in the hallway and watched my husband through the gap in the door. Watched him open that cabinet, take out that bottle, count the drops. He was so calm. He had done it so many times that it had become routine to him. And I had been standing on the other side of that door in my own house, drinking what he gave me and thanking him for it. That image still catches me sometimes when I'm not expecting it. I've had to think hard about what actually saved me. It wasn't luck, though Dr. Whitmore almost went a different direction with my diagnosis. It wasn't strength, because for most of those 8 months I felt like I had none left. What saved me, I think, was a combination of three things working together. And I don't say this to make my story sound like a lesson, because I genuinely hate when terrible experiences get flattened into tidy takeaways. But it's true, and I'd rather say it plainly. The first was that I didn't stop asking questions about my own body. I was dismissed, I was redirected, I was told it was stress and depression and probably just the pace of modern life. I accepted some of that because I was exhausted and because the people saying it had medical degrees. But somewhere underneath all the exhaustion, I kept not quite believing it. That quiet refusal to fully accept an explanation that didn't fit, that's what kept me showing up to new appointments, describing new symptoms, giving the next doctor the full picture. Paying attention to your own instincts, even when the world is actively arguing against them, is not a small thing. It cost me something to keep doing it. It was also the thing that eventually led me to Dr. Whitmore. The second was that when I found out the truth, I didn't act on fear. I acted on clarity. Connor had spent months making me feel foggy and confused and diminished, and my first real choice after hearing what he had done was to be sharp, to think, to resist the impulse to confront him immediately, which would have been emotionally satisfying and strategically ruinous. I called Brooke. I called Janet. I documented what I could. I gave the detective something to work with. The outcome at trial, 22 years, no parole for 15, was not separate from those choices. Actions have weight. His did. Mine did too. The third is harder to name cleanly, but it has to do with what I decided I was worth. At some point during those 8 months of being sick, I started shrinking. Canceling things, apologizing for symptoms, making myself smaller so I'd be less of a burden. Connor had helped engineer that. But the seed of it was already in me, the willingness to disappear a little for the sake of keeping the peace. Learning to stop doing that has been the longest part of the recovery. Longer than the thallium clearing from my bloodstream. Longer than the hair growing back. I still live in Asheville. Pepper is asleep at the foot of my bed right now. The mountains outside my window are doing what they do every morning, which is exist without asking permission, without apologizing for taking up space. I'm trying to learn from that.